It was a bright Saturday afternoon, and the sun was shining high above the quiet neighborhood. The streets were calm. Children's laughter echoed faintly from a few houses away, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the tall oak trees. It was the kind of day that made people want to relax and forget about their worries for a while. In one of the neat houses at the end of Maplewood Street lived Lisa Monroe, a woman known to some neighbors as quiet and polite, but very few knew what she actually did for a living. Lisa wasn't just any ordinary resident. She was the FBI chief, one of the top figures in law enforcement responsible for leading major investigations and overseeing national security operations. Her work was intense, stressful, and often dangerous. But to the people living nearby, she was just that lady with the nice garden. For weeks, Lisa had been working long hours on a sensitive federal case. She barely slept, often returning home after midnight. Her phone never stopped ringing and her mind never stopped planning. So when her schedule finally allowed her a free weekend, she decided to do something simple yet rare for her. Absolutely nothing. That afternoon, she changed into her swimsuit, grabbed a pair of sunglasses, and headed to her backyard. The sun felt warm against her skin as she stretched out on a lounge chair beside her sparkling blue pool. A glass of lemonade sat on the small table next to her, beads of condensation running down the glass. She closed her eyes, feeling the sun's rays and the sound of water gently rippling in the breeze. For the first time in a long while, Lisa felt free. No phone calls, no emergencies, no agents asking for orders. Just peace. She smiled to herself, thinking about how different her work life was from this quiet moment. Usually her days were filled with noise, the hum of computers, the chatter of agents, and the constant buzz of urgency. Now there was only the chirping of birds and the distant sound of a lawnmower somewhere down the street. She let her thoughts wander. Maybe later she'd grill something for dinner or take a walk through the park. Maybe she'd even visit her sister tomorrow. For now, though, she just wanted to stay still, soak in the warmth, and feel like a normal person again. Unaware of what was about to happen, Lisa turned up the music on her phone, choosing something calm and relaxing. A soft jazz tune played in the background as she sipped her lemonade. The water sparkled in the sunlight and everything felt perfect, almost too perfect. Across the street, behind her fence, someone else had noticed her. Carol Jensen, Lisa's next-door neighbor, peeked through her upstairs window. Carol was known in the neighborhood for her curiosity. Some called it nosiness. She liked to know what everyone was doing and often shared her observations with others. When she saw Lisa stretched out by the pool, she frowned slightly. Carol didn't remember seeing Lisa that close up before, and from her angle, it almost looked like a stranger had entered the property. Lisa's backyard wasn't fully visible from the road because of the tall hedges and wooden fence, but from Carol's upstairs window she could just make out the pool area. She squinted. "Who's that woman?" she muttered to herself. The owners must be away and someone's broken in. Meanwhile, Lisa remained completely unaware of the watchful eyes behind the curtains. She adjusted her hat and sighed happily, whispering to herself, "Finally, some peace." If only she knew what was coming. As minutes passed, Carol's curiosity turned into suspicion. She had lived next door for years but rarely saw anyone using that pool. In her mind, she was sure something wasn't right. Maybe it was a squatter. Maybe someone had broken in while the owners were gone. Her imagination ran wild, and without taking a moment to confirm her thoughts, she decided to act. But for Lisa, time seemed to slow down. The sunlight glowed warmly on her skin, and the sound of water gave her a sense of calm she hadn't felt in months. It was a precious moment, one she desperately needed. She smiled faintly, thinking how ordinary people probably took days like this for granted. For her, this was luxury. The world outside her fence was still. A few cars passed by, a dog barked somewhere in the distance, and the smell of freshly cut grass filled the air. Lisa leaned back, completely relaxed, unaware that in just a few moments peace would turn into confusion. It was a perfect afternoon, or so it seemed. Sometimes trouble arrives when you least expect it, even in the middle of a calm and sunny day. Lisa had no idea that someone was about to call the police on her for being in her own backyard. She didn't know that her simple day of rest would soon become a story that everyone in the neighborhood would be talking about for weeks. And as she closed her eyes and smiled under the sun, She remained blissfully unaware of the drama that was quietly brewing just across the fence. Across the quiet street from Lisa Monroe's home lived Carol Jensen, a woman in her late 50s who prided herself on knowing everything that went on in the neighborhood. Carol was the kind of neighbor who noticed when someone got a new car, when a package was delivered, or even when the mailman came a little late. She didn't mean harm, at least not in her own mind. She simply liked to stay informed. But to everyone else, Carol was known as the neighborhood detective. On that sunny afternoon, Carol was watering her front garden when something caught her eye. Through the small gap in the wooden fence separating her yard from Lisa's, she noticed movement. Someone lying on a lounge chair beside the pool. The person was wearing sunglasses and a hat, relaxing under the sun. Carol froze for a moment, narrowing her eyes. "Wait a minute," she whispered to herself. "Who's that?" In all the years she'd lived next door, Carol had never seen anyone use that pool. The house was always quiet, and the woman who lived there, Lisa, was rarely home. Carol barely knew her. Sometimes she saw her getting into a car early in the morning, dressed in formal clothes, but she never stayed around to chat. To Carol, that kind of secrecy was suspicious. She bent a little closer, pretending to fix her flower pot but actually trying to get a better view. The woman by the pool seemed too comfortable, as if she owned the place. Carol's mind began spinning stories faster than she could stop them. Maybe the owner's out of town, she thought, and this person broke in. Look at her, acting like she belongs there. Her curiosity grew stronger by the minute. She went back inside her house, climbed up to her bedroom window, and peeked through the curtains. From that height, she had a clearer view of the pool area. There was Lisa, sunbathing peacefully, eyes closed, headphones in, completely unaware of the silent investigation happening next door. Carol gasped softly. "That's not the homeowner. I've never seen her like that before," she told herself. "I should do something before it's too late." Her heart began to race. She had read so many crime stories online, watched endless true crime shows, and in her mind, this was how it all started, with a stranger sneaking into a quiet neighborhood and pretending to belong. Without pausing to think or verify, she reached for her phone as she punched in the number for the local police. Her hands trembled slightly, part fear, part excitement. Carol had always imagined herself as a responsible citizen, someone who acted fast in times of danger. And right now she believed she was doing exactly that. "Hello, yes," she said in a low, serious tone when the dispatcher answered. "I think there's a trespasser at my neighbor's house, a woman. She's by the pool, lying there like she owns the place. The real owner isn't home, I'm sure of it." The dispatcher asked a few questions and the address, a description, whether the person seemed dangerous. Carol answered quickly, giving every detail she could observe from her window. "She's wearing sunglasses, seems calm, but I just don't think she belongs there," Carol insisted. "Please send someone right away." When she hung up, Carol felt a strange mix of pride and anxiety. "Good job, Carol," she told herself. "You might have just stopped a crime." But deep down, a small voice in her head wondered if she was overreacting. She looked back out the window. Lisa was still there, completely relaxed, sipping her lemonade and scrolling through her phone. There was nothing threatening about her, nothing odd, except that Carol didn't recognize her. Still, Carol brushed the thought away. "Better safe than sorry," she muttered, straightening up. "If she's innocent, they'll just sort it out. But if she's not?" She didn't finish the sentence. She grabbed her binoculars. Yes, she actually owned a pair, and stood by the window, watching closely like a self-appointed guardian of the block. Down the street, the faint sound of sirens began to echo. Carol's heart jumped. "Oh, they're here already," she whispered, feeling a mix of excitement and fear. Finally, someone's taking action. Meanwhile, behind the fence, Lisa still had no idea what was happening. She was humming softly to her music, enjoying what she thought would be a peaceful afternoon. She didn't know that a small misunderstanding was about to turn into a dramatic and rather embarrassing scene. Carol quickly stepped outside and pretended to water her plants again, acting casual as the police cars rolled up to the curb. She watched as two uniformed officers got out, their eyes scanning the property. In Carol's mind, this was justice in action. The neighborhood was safe because she had spoken up. She smiled faintly, proud of her quick thinking. But what Carol didn't realize was that the trespasser she had reported was not just any woman. It was FBI Chief Lisa Monroe, one of the most powerful women in federal law enforcement. And within the next few minutes, Carol's heroic moment would turn into the most awkward, unforgettable incident of her life. Carol Jensen's fingers hovered over her phone, her mind racing faster than her heartbeat. She had never actually called the police before, but today felt different. To her, this was a serious situation. A stranger, a woman she didn't recognize, was lounging by the pool next door, and Carol was convinced something wasn't right. The thought that someone could be bold enough to break into a house in her quiet neighborhood made her uneasy. Her palms were slightly sweaty as she stared out her bedroom window again, peeking through the thin white curtains. The woman, Lisa Monroe, was lying there so calmly, completely unaware of the storm that was about to come her way. Carol whispered to herself, "She looks too comfortable to be a burglar." But what if that's part of the act? Her imagination had taken over logic. Years of watching crime dramas and reading mystery novels had shaped her into someone who saw danger in every quiet corner. She opened her phone's keypad and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? Came a calm voice through the speaker. Carol swallowed hard. Hi, yes, I need to report something suspicious, she said, lowering her voice as if she were in a spy movie. There's a woman next door. I think she broke into the house. She's by the pool, acting like she lives there. The operator asked for her address and details. Carol gave them quickly, her voice trembling slightly but filled with self-assurance. The homeowners are away a lot, she continued. I never see them, and this lady just showed up. She's got sunglasses on, lying there like she owns the place. Please send someone fast. You never know what people are capable of these days. The dispatcher stayed calm, noting everything down. All right, ma'am. We're sending officers to check it out. Please stay inside and don't approach the person. Carol's heart pounded as she ended the call. She stood still for a moment, her phone still in her hand, feeling a strange rush of adrenaline. She had done it. She had taken action. From her window, she could see Lisa slowly turning over on her lounge chair, completely at peace. Carol frowned, thinking, how can someone who broke into a house be that relaxed? But she brushed the thought away. Maybe she's confident. Criminals are like that sometimes. She started pacing the room, replaying everything in her mind, what she'd seen, what she'd told the dispatcher, what might happen next. A few minutes later, faint sirens echoed in the distance. Carol's heart leaped. They're coming, she whispered. Finally, someone's going to handle this. She rushed back to her window and watched eagerly as 2 police cars turned into Maplewood Street. The sound of the sirens faded as the vehicles stopped in front of Lisa's house. 2 officers stepped out, 1 male, 1 female, both alert and professional. They began walking toward the gate that led to Lisa's backyard. Carol could hardly contain her excitement. She felt like she was witnessing a real-life episode of her favorite show, Neighborhood Watch Heroes. She even grabbed her binoculars again, focusing on the scene unfolding below. Meanwhile, Lisa was still lying on her chair, her phone playing, soft jazz, completely unaware that she was moments away from being questioned by the local police, all because of a neighbor's assumption. As the officers approached the side gate, Carol noticed one of them signaling to the other to stay cautious. They opened the latch slowly, stepping inside. The moment felt heavy, almost cinematic. Ma'am? One officer called out, his voice firm but polite. Lisa opened her eyes, startled. She quickly took off her sunglasses and sat up. Oh, officers? What's going on? She asked, blinking in confusion. From behind the curtain, Carol held her breath. This was the moment of truth. Would the intruder confess? Would the police take her away? Lisa stood, grabbing a towel to cover her shoulders. Is everything all right? She asked again, still puzzled. The officers exchanged a glance before the female officer spoke. We received a report of possible trespassing at this address. Are you the homeowner, ma'am? Lisa blinked in disbelief. Trespassing? This is my house, she said, a small laugh escaping her lips. Who reported that? From her window, Carol's eyes widened. She couldn't hear their words clearly, but the sight of Lisa gesturing toward the officers made her uneasy. Lisa reached for her phone on the table and said calmly, "Would you like to see my ID?" The officers nodded. Lisa handed over her identification, and as one of them looked closely at it, his expression changed instantly. His eyes widened slightly, and then, in a tone that mixed shock and sudden respect, he said quietly to his partner, "She's FBI." Carol's curiosity grew stronger. She leaned closer to the glass, trying to see what was happening. "Why aren't they arresting her?" she muttered. "What's going on?" Inside the yard, Lisa smiled faintly, now realizing what had happened. "Let me guess," she said in a calm, almost amused voice. "A neighbor thought I broke in?" The officers exchanged awkward smiles. "It seems so, ma'am. Sorry for the confusion. Someone must have made a mistake." Lisa shook her head lightly, half amused, half annoyed. "No problem. You're just doing your job." As the officers apologized again, Carol's stomach dropped. Something didn't feel right. The tension she had imagined, the dramatic arrest, the hero moment, never came, and when she saw the officers giving Lisa a respectful nod before walking away, Carol felt her face burn with embarrassment. What she didn't know, not yet, was that the woman she had just called the police on wasn't just any homeowner. She was FBI Chief Lisa Monroe, one of the most respected women in the country. And soon, Carol's little mistake would turn into one of the most unforgettable lessons of her life. The faint sound of sirens grew louder as they turned onto Maplewood Street, cutting through the calm afternoon air. The neighbors who were out mowing their lawns or walking their dogs paused for a moment, looking around curiously. Police cars were a rare sight in this quiet suburb, and whenever one showed up, people noticed. Carol Jensen, standing behind her lace curtains, felt a strange mix of pride and nervousness. "They're here," she whispered to herself, her heart pounding. She peeked outside again, trying to act casual, even though her hands were trembling slightly. 2 police cruisers stopped in front of Lisa Monroe's house. The officers got out, a tall male officer with a calm, professional look, and a younger female officer with sharp eyes and a notebook in her hand. They exchanged a quick glance before walking toward the side gate that led to the backyard. From her window, Carol could barely contain herself. She whispered like a commentator on a live show, "Yes, that's it. Check the pool area. She's right there." Her curiosity burned stronger than her doubt. Behind the fence, Lisa was still lying on her lounge chair, her sunglasses on, soaking in the golden afternoon sun. She had no idea what was happening just a few feet away. The only sound she heard was the soft music playing through her earbuds and the rhythmic buzz of a bee hovering near a flower pot. The officers opened the gate slowly, their boots crunching lightly on the stone path. The female officer signaled for silence as they moved closer. Lisa sensed movement, pulled one earbud out and turned her head. She frowned slightly. 2 uniformed officers stood at the edge of her pool area. Lisa sat up, confused but calm. "Can I help you?" she asked, shading her eyes from the sun. "Good afternoon, ma'am," said the male officer in a respectful tone. "We received a call about a possible trespassing at this address. Are you the homeowner?" Lisa blinked in surprise. "Trespassing?" she repeated, half laughing. "Yes, I live here. Is this some kind of joke?" The female officer looked slightly uncomfortable but stayed polite. "Do you happen to have identification, ma'am? Just for verification." Lisa sighed softly, realizing this wasn't a prank. She reached for her robe and walked over to the small table by the door where her bag sat. "Sure," she said, pulling out her wallet. She handed them her FBI identification card, the one few people ever saw. The male officer took it, his expression shifting immediately as he read the name. "Lisa Monroe," he murmured, his voice dropping a little. His eyes darted to his partner. She leaned closer, reading the badge too, her eyebrows lifted in shock. "Ma'am, you're—" "Yes," Lisa interrupted with a calm smile. "I'm the FBI chief." For a few seconds, silence filled the air. The 2 officers stood frozen, unsure what to say next. Then, almost simultaneously, they both straightened up, their faces turning a mix of embarrassment and disbelief. "Oh, Chief Monroe. We didn't realize," the male officer stammered, clearly flustered. Lisa waved her hand gently. "It's fine. You're doing your job," she said, her tone calm and professional. "But I'd really like to know who thought I broke into my own home." Outside the fence, Carol watched the entire scene unfold from her window. She couldn't hear the words clearly, but the body language was unmistakable. The officers weren't arresting the woman. They were apologizing to her. Carol's heart began to sink. "Wait, what's happening?" she muttered. "Why are they acting so respectful?" Inside the yard, the officers were trying to recover from their awkwardness. The female officer gave a small nod and said, "We received a report from a concerned neighbor." "There was some confusion, ma'am. We're sorry for the disturbance." Lisa gave a half smile, her eyes calm but sharp. "I understand. Sometimes people jump to conclusions." She looked toward the fence for a brief moment, as if she somehow knew exactly who was behind this misunderstanding. The officers quickly assured her that they would make a note in the report that there was no issue. Lisa thanked them for their professionalism and said kindly, "Next time, tell your caller to verify before calling 911. Saves everyone time." As the officers left, Carol stepped back from the window, her stomach twisting. The adrenaline that had made her feel brave minutes ago now turned into regret. "Oh no, what have I done?" she whispered. From her yard, she could hear faint voices as the officers spoke quietly near their cars, probably explaining what had happened. One of them even chuckled softly, saying, "Can you believe that? Calling the police on the FBI chief herself." Carol's cheeks burned red. She closed the curtain, her hands trembling. For years, she had prided herself on being the watchful eye of the neighborhood. But this time, her so-called awareness had turned into humiliation. Meanwhile, Lisa sat back down in her chair, exhaled deeply, and looked up at the sky. The peace of the afternoon had been disturbed, but she couldn't help smiling at the absurdity of it all. "Only in suburbia," she whispered to herself with a laugh. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the lawn. The police cars drove away quietly, leaving behind a strange calm, the kind that follows after a storm. Inside her house, Carol paced back and forth, replaying the moment over and over in her mind. She thought about apologizing, but didn't know how to face Lisa now. How do you knock on the door of the FBI chief and admit you called the cops on her for sunbathing? She sighed, sitting by the window where it all began. "Next time," she whispered softly, "I'll think before I act." But she didn't know that Lisa, calm, forgiving, and wise, was already planning to handle the situation in her own graceful way. And this strange misunderstanding wasn't over yet. It was only the beginning of a story the whole neighborhood would remember. The air felt heavy with silence after the police officer's arrival. The faint hum of the patrol car engines still lingered, and the sound of birds chirping seemed distant, almost shy. Lisa Monroe stood by her pool, holding her FBI ID in one hand and her towel in the other, her calm eyes studying the two police officers standing before her. The male officer looked embarrassed. He rubbed the back of his neck and said quietly, "Chief Monroe, I'm so sorry for this misunderstanding. We got a call from a neighbor saying someone was trespassing. We had no idea." Lisa smiled faintly, though her tone carried quiet authority. "You did the right thing by checking it out," she said. "It's your job to respond. But maybe next time, remind people to confirm before jumping to conclusions." The younger female officer nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am, of course. We completely understand." Lisa could sense their nervousness. Most people didn't expect to stumble upon the FBI chief while responding to a routine neighborhood call. Her composure, her quiet confidence. It was clear she was used to dealing with tense situations, just not ones that happened in her swimsuit beside her own pool. Still, she couldn't help but feel slightly amused. The irony of it all, the head of one of the most powerful law enforcement agencies in the country, mistaken for a trespasser in her own home, was almost comical. She tilted her head slightly. "So which neighbor made the call?" she asked casually. The two officers exchanged a quick glance. The male officer hesitated. "We, can't disclose that information, ma'am, but I'm sure it was just a misunderstanding." Lisa smiled knowingly. "Let me guess," she said softly, glancing toward the wooden fence that separated her property from Carol Jensen's house. "The one who always stares out the window with binoculars?" The female officer tried to suppress a grin. You might be right, ma'am. Lisa laughed lightly, shaking her head. Figures. Just then the side gate creaked open again. Carol Jensen stepped out from her yard, holding a pair of garden shears as if she just happened to be trimming her bushes, but her eyes betrayed her curiosity. Oh. Officers, is everything all right? She called out, pretending surprise, though her voice quivered slightly. Both officers turned toward her. The male officer answered politely. Everything's fine, ma'am. No crime here, just a misunderstanding. Carol froze, her fake smile flickering. Oh really? That's good, she stammered. Her eyes darted to Lisa, who was now standing tall, arms crossed, watching her calmly. For the first time, Carol noticed the badge in Lisa's hand. The gleaming gold emblem with bold letters. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Her face drained of color. Oh my, she whispered. Lisa didn't speak right away. She simply studied Carol for a moment, not with anger, but with a quiet, measured look that seemed to cut right through pretense. The kind of look only someone trained in reading people could give. Finally, she said softly, You must be the one who made the call. Carol's hands trembled as she gripped her shears. I just thought, I didn't recognize you and, Lisa interrupted gently, her tone calm but firm. You thought I broke into my own home because you didn't recognize me? Carol opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her cheeks turned red. I didn't mean any harm, she said quietly. I was just trying to help. Lisa took a slow breath. I appreciate the intention, but next time, maybe ask a question before calling the police on someone. Sometimes a simple hello works better than suspicion. Her voice wasn't angry. It was patient, deliberate, almost teacher-like. It carried weight, but also grace. The officers exchanged glances again, clearly impressed by how calmly she handled the situation. Carol, on the other hand, wanted to disappear into the ground. I really am sorry, Carol said, her voice shaking. I just wanted to make sure everything was safe. Lisa nodded. Safety is important, she said, but so is understanding. Not everyone who looks unfamiliar is a threat. Sometimes they just live next door. There was a long pause. The sun glinted off the pool's surface and the reflection shimmered across Lisa's face. Despite the tension, her expression softened. The female officer finally spoke. Chief Monroe will go ahead and mark this as a false report, no action needed. Again, our apologies for disturbing you. Lisa gave a small professional nod. Thank you, officers. You handled it well. As they left, Carol stood awkwardly near the fence, still clutching her shears, her face a mix of embarrassment and regret. The police cruisers drove off slowly, their lights no longer flashing. The quiet of the neighborhood returned, but the air between Lisa and Carol felt thick and strange. Lisa turned to her neighbor one last time. You know, she said gently, it's funny. People spend their whole lives trying to feel safe in their own homes. But sometimes the real danger isn't strangers, it's assumptions. Carol looked down, too ashamed to reply. Lisa gave a faint smile. Don't worry. I'm not angry, just next time come say hi. I don't bite. With that, she picked up her towel, turned around, and walked back toward her house, the sound of her footsteps echoing softly on the stone path. Carol stood frozen for a few seconds, her heart heavy with guilt. Then she turned slowly toward her own house, whispering to herself, What have I done? From that day on, the sight of police cars made her heart race, not out of excitement, but out of memory. Meanwhile, Lisa closed her back door, took a deep breath, and smiled faintly. It wasn't the peaceful afternoon she had planned, but it had become a moment she would never forget. She poured herself another glass of lemonade, looked out at her pool and muttered softly, So much for peace and quiet. When the police cars finally rolled away, the street fell silent again. The calm that returned felt heavier than before. Awkward, thick, and almost too quiet. Carol Jensen stood frozen beside her garden fence, still gripping her shears though her hands had stopped shaking. The faint echo of the sirens faded in the distance, leaving only the sound of a lone bird chirping on a telephone wire. For a moment, Carol didn't move. She just stood there, staring at the spot where the officers had been moments ago. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest as her mind replayed what had just happened. The badge, the look on Lisa's face, the way the officers had apologized. FBI chief. The words repeated over and over in her head like a broken record. I called the police. On the FBI chief, she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible. The realization hit her like a punch in the gut. Her face burned with embarrassment. She could almost feel the humiliation crawl up her neck. She had been so sure she was doing the right thing, that she was protecting her neighborhood, maybe even preventing a crime. But now she just felt foolish. From the other side of the fence, Lisa's wind chime tinkled softly in the breeze, as if mocking the silence between them. Carol looked toward the house, half expecting Lisa to come storming out in anger, but she didn't. The backyard was calm again. The sound of the pool filter hummed steadily, and Lisa was nowhere in sight. Carol sighed heavily. "Brilliant, Carol, just brilliant," she muttered. "You didn't just embarrass yourself. You probably made the neighborhood gossip list for the next 10 years. She turned and hurried back into her house, shutting the door quietly behind her. Inside, everything suddenly felt too loud. The ticking clock, the hum of the refrigerator, even her own heartbeat. She paced back and forth across her living room, hands on her head. "What were you thinking?" she scolded herself. "You didn't even ask her who she was. You just jumped to conclusions like a fool." Her cat Milo meowed from the couch as if joining the argument. Carol pointed at him. "Don't you look at me like that. You didn't stop me either." She sat down with a sigh, staring blankly out the window. Across the fence, the top of Lisa's house was barely visible. The curtains were drawn and there was no movement. Carol wondered what Lisa must be thinking of her now. Probably that she was a busybody, or worse, a paranoid old woman with too much time on her hands. And the truth was, maybe she wasn't entirely wrong. For years, Carol had made it her unofficial duty to keep an eye on the neighborhood. She liked feeling useful, like she was the guardian of Maplewood Street. But now she realized her version of helping had crossed the line. Her phone buzzed suddenly. It was a message from her friend and neighbor, Nancy. "Carol, I just saw police cars at your end of the street." "What happened?" Carol's stomach twisted. She quickly typed back, "Nothing serious. Just a mix-up." She hesitated for a moment, then added, "Please don't ask Lisa about it." She hit send, then buried her face in her hands. "Oh, it's already spreading," she groaned. Meanwhile, behind the closed curtains next door, Lisa was sitting at her dining table, sipping tea. She wasn't angry, just thoughtful. It wasn't the first time she'd been misjudged. In her career, she'd seen far worse assumptions made about people. But this one was different. It wasn't professional, it was personal. It was her home. She looked out the window at Carol's house and shook her head with a faint smile. "I bet she feels terrible right now," she murmured to herself. She wasn't wrong. Back in Carol's living room, guilt gnawed at her so much that she couldn't sit still. She kept replaying Lisa's calm face in her mind, that look of quiet confidence, the steady tone in her voice, the way she didn't lash out or humiliate her. It made Carol feel even smaller. Finally, she muttered, "I should go apologize." But the thought of walking over there made her stomach twist in knots. How do you apologize to the FBI chief for calling the police on her for sunbathing? It sounded ridiculous even in her own head. She peeked through the blinds again. The pool area was empty. The chair where Lisa had been sitting still had a towel draped over it. The lemonade glass was half full on the table. It looked so peaceful, like nothing had ever happened. Except Carol knew she'd shattered that peace. That night, Carol barely slept. Every creak in the house made her jump. She imagined Lisa telling the whole story to her FBI colleagues, maybe even laughing about it at work. The idea made her cheeks flush all over again. Morning came slowly. The sunlight streamed through the blinds and Carol sat up, exhausted but determined. She made herself a cup of coffee and stood by the window once more. Lisa's back door opened. She stepped out, dressed in a crisp suit this time, her hair neatly tied back. She looked calm, powerful, untouchable, the kind of person who carried authority even in silence. Carol took a deep breath. "All right," she whispered. "You made a mess, now fix it." She slipped on her shoes, walked out of her house, and crossed the short distance between their yards. Her heart pounded with every step. Good morning," she called softly. Lisa turned, her expression unreadable. "Good morning, Carol," she said, her voice smooth and calm. Carol hesitated, clutching her hands together. "I just wanted to say I'm really, really sorry for yesterday. I thought, well, I didn't think actually. I just reacted. For a second, Lisa said nothing. Then she smiled gently. "It happens," she said. "But next time, before calling the police on your neighbor, maybe just knock on the door." Carol let out a shaky laugh, partly from relief, partly from shame. "Fair point," she said. Lisa extended her hand. "Apology accepted." Carol shook it, smiling nervously. "Thank you, and, if you ever need someone to water your plants, you know where to find me." Lisa laughed softly. "I'll keep that in mind." As Carol walked back home, she felt lighter, still embarrassed but grateful. She'd learned something important that day. Not every good intention leads to the right action, and as for Lisa, she finally got her peace back, sunbathing in her backyard, this time without interruption, while her neighbor next door quietly minded her own business and learned to see before assuming. The morning after the incident, the sun rose soft and golden over Maplewood Street. Everything looked normal again. Children waiting for the school bus, joggers passing by, the hum of sprinklers starting in nearby yards. But for Carol Jensen, nothing felt normal. She had barely slept, tossing and turning, haunted by the thought of her own foolishness. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Lisa's calm expression. Not angry, not harsh, just quietly disappointed. That look said more than words ever could. By mid-morning, Carol decided to do what most people would avoid. She was going to apologize again. Not through text. Not by avoiding it. In person. She put on a fresh blouse, brushed her hair, and took a deep breath before stepping outside. As she approached Lisa's front porch, her palms were sweating and her legs felt heavy. She almost turned back twice. But guilt pushed her forward. When she knocked, the door opened after a moment. Lisa stood there, not in her swimsuit this time, but in a sharp navy suit, the kind that looked made for power. Her hair was tied back neatly, and her eyes looked both kind and commanding. She was clearly getting ready to leave for work. Carol hesitated. I know you're busy, but I just wanted to say I'm sorry again," she began, her voice trembling. "Yesterday was a mistake. I didn't think. I panicked and I just acted." Lisa listened silently, her expression unreadable. Then she sighed softly and smiled. Not the forced kind of smile people give to be polite, but a genuine one that reached her eyes. "It's all right, Carol," she said calmly. "You made a wrong assumption." "It happens." Carol blinked, surprised. "You're not mad?" Lisa shook her head. "No, anger doesn't solve much. You were trying to help even if you went about it the wrong way." That answer stunned Carol. She had expected irritation, maybe even sarcasm, but instead she got understanding. Lisa continued, "In my line of work, I see people make decisions out of fear every day. Fear makes us act before we think. The trick is to learn from it, not repeat it." Carol's throat tightened. "You really mean that?" she asked softly. Lisa smiled again. "Of course. Besides," she added with a small laugh, "it's not every day I get the police called on me for sunbathing." Carol couldn't help it. She laughed too, though her face turned red. "I honestly thought I was saving the neighborhood," she said, shaking her head. "Turns out I was just making a fool of myself." Lisa chuckled gently. "We've all made fools of ourselves at some point," she said. "The difference is that not everyone owns up to it. You did. That takes courage." For the first time since the incident, Carol felt her chest lighten. She nodded slowly, her voice steadier now. "Thank you, really. I didn't expect you to be this kind about it." Lisa looked thoughtful. "I've seen what happens when people respond to mistakes with more anger," she said. "It never fixes anything. Sometimes the best reaction is the one people least expect. Kindness." That sentence lingered in Carol's mind. The best reaction is kindness. Lisa's phone buzzed then, a reminder for a meeting. She glanced at it, then back at Carol. "I have to go," she said. "But it's good we talked. You're not a bad person, Carol, just a little too alert." Carol laughed softly. "I'll take that as a compliment." Lisa grinned. "Fair enough." She started walking to her car, briefcase in hand. Before she got in, she turned back. "You know," she said, "if you ever want to talk or if you see something strange, you can call me before you call the police." Carol chuckled nervously. "Deal," Lisa winked. "Have a good day, neighbor." As the car drove off, Carol stood in her driveway watching until it disappeared at the end of the street. She felt different, lighter, grateful. The woman she'd wrongly accused hadn't just forgiven her. She'd taught her something. Later that day, Carol decided to do something small, but meaningful. She baked a batch of lemon cookies, Lisa's favorite scent from the candle she'd seen through her window weeks ago, and left them on her porch with a note. The note read, "To my neighbor Lisa, thank you for responding with grace when I responded with fear. Carol." When Lisa returned home that evening, she saw the plate, smiled, and placed it on her kitchen counter. For a moment, she just stood there, quiet, thoughtful, and oddly touched. She had faced high-stakes situations in her career, dangerous criminals, courtroom pressure, national crises, but somehow, this small neighborhood misunderstanding had reminded her of something deeper, the power of patience. Outside, Carol peeked through her window, this time without binoculars, and saw Lisa reading the note. When she saw Lisa smile, her heart finally rested. That night, for the first time in 2 days, both women slept peacefully. The neighborhood was quiet again, not the kind of quiet filled with suspicion, but one filled with newfound respect. And though Carol would never admit it out loud, she started admiring Lisa, not just as the FBI chief, but as the kind of person everyone wished they could be when faced with misunderstanding. Calm, forgiving, and impossibly composed. It was unexpected. It was humbling. And for Carol, it was unforgettable. The days that followed were calm on Maplewood Street, the kind of calm that comes after a storm, when the air feels lighter and the silence carries understanding instead of tension. Life slowly returned to its usual rhythm. But for Carol Jensen and Lisa Monroe, things had quietly changed forever. Each morning, Carol watered her garden, waving politely when Lisa left for work. And each afternoon, when Lisa returned home, she'd see Carol sitting on her porch with her cat Milo sipping tea. There were no more suspicious glances, no more fences of fear, just a quiet peace between neighbors who had learned to truly see each other. It was strange. Carol thought how one mistake could open someone's eyes so wide. Before that day, she had prided herself on being watchful. She thought paying attention meant keeping others safe, but now she realized it also meant understanding what she saw. For the first time, she saw the difference between protecting someone and judging them. She often replayed that moment in her head, the police cars, the embarrassment, and Lisa's calm voice saying, "Sometimes, the best reaction is kindness." That line had carved itself into her heart. So, Carol made a quiet promise she would never let fear control her actions again. One Saturday, about a week later, Lisa was once again outside, relaxing by her pool. The sunlight glimmered on the water, and she wore that same peaceful smile as the first day, the day that had spiraled into chaos. But this time there was no tension in the air, no eyes watching from behind curtains. Carol sat in her own yard, pruning her roses. She glanced over the fence, and not to spy, not to judge, but to wave. Lisa noticed her and waved back, smiling warmly. "Beautiful day," Carol called. Lisa laughed lightly. "No police this time," she teased. Carol's cheeks flushed, but she laughed too. "Let's keep it that way." The sound of their laughter floated across the fence, soft and genuine. Two neighbors who had started on the wrong foot but found something better in the end. Understanding. Later that evening, Carol baked another batch of cookies, chocolate chip this time, and brought them to Lisa's doorstep herself. Lisa opened the door, pleasantly surprised. "You didn't have to do that," Lisa said kindly. "I know," Carol replied, "but I wanted to. Consider it a peace treaty. No more misunderstandings and just good neighbors." Lisa smiled and took the plate. "Deal," she said. They sat for a while on Lisa's porch talking like old friends. Carol told her about her late husband, her love for gardening, her habit of reading mystery novels that had probably made her too suspicious for her own good. Lisa shared stories from her early career, the dangerous missions, the moments of doubt, and the times she learned that calmness could solve problems faster than power ever could. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in pink and gold, both women sat quietly for a moment. Watching the world slow down, Carol broke the silence first. "You know, I've lived here for over 20 years, and I never really knew my neighbors." "Not like this," Lisa nodded. "Sometimes it takes a little chaos to create connection," she said softly. Carol smiled at that. "Well, I'm glad this one ended the way it did," Lisa chuckled. "Me too." When Carol returned home that night, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. The kind of peace that comes from learning, forgiving, and growing. She looked out her window one last time before bed. Lisa's porch light was on, casting a warm glow over her front steps. Carol smiled to herself and whispered, "Lesson learned." And it truly was. From that day on, Carol never jumped to conclusions again. She still kept an eye on the neighborhood. Old habits die hard. But now she watched with compassion, not suspicion. She waved more, smiled more, talked more. She learned that understanding people didn't start with observing them. It started with listening to them. Lisa, on her side, found a rare kind of friendship in the middle of an ordinary suburb, the kind that reminded her why she joined law enforcement in the first place. Not just to enforce laws, but to connect with humanity. And though no one in the neighborhood ever found out the full story, everyone noticed something different. The two houses at the end of the street that used to stand silent now shared laughter, small gifts, and the sound of two women who had learned from one extraordinary mistake. In a world full of quick judgments and faster tempers, this small story on Maplewood Street became a quiet example of something rare. That sometimes, the strongest people are the ones who forgive, and the wisest are those who admit when they're wrong. It began with suspicion. It ended with respect. And between them, under that same warm sun, two neighbors found something more powerful than authority or apology. They found understanding.